Hi, and welcome to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Monday, September 29th, 2025. And Michael's getting ready to come in, so we'll wait just a second, let him join us. We're glad that you all are with us. And Michael is here, so I'm going to say welcome, Michael.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. I'm excited that we're here again, getting to take this conversation to the next level. And, they talk about the way that gold is purified. It has to go through the fire. And I am, some of you got the text I sent out this morning, a few folks I sent it to, what we're going to be talking about today, but I feel like I've been through with the healing crisis I had last week. I missed last Thursday and Friday show because I didn't have any voice. My body was in a detox, but a whole other layer of the fire. Not the most intense healing crisis I've ever been through, but as the result of all I can say is the result is probably the sweetest that I've had in almost 60 years of doing this. So it's pretty cool. If you want to kind of tap into what I'm going to talk about, I just pasted it in several sections because there's a limit as to how much pasting can be done. And the topic we're going to cover, there's been an unfolding, particularly over the last, it's been about 9 months since I did at least did as much of a quantum StillPoint session on myself as I could. You might remember that we covered, I spoke after I had done that session about the Beatitudes and how the Beatitudes moved from an intellectual exercise that I had done repeatedly decades ago as I was working with the Aramaic. And then in the quantum StillPoint, I got a whole new understanding, a whole new refinement experientially of what the Beatitudes really meant. And if you've been on the show regularly, you listen to me unfold as that quantum StillPoint process is deepened, and how my practice in particular of the StillPoint process is deepened. And last week I missed, pardon me, it's the week before now. I missed both for Thursday and Friday show because I didn't have a voice. I was in a healing crisis. And the result of that healing crisis, one of, golly, I can't count how many I've been through in the last 55 or 60 years since I started to understand from a naturopathic medical point of view just what healing looks like and what the symptoms of healing are. But Sunday morning, we have a monthly Mindshifters and StillPoint Breathing Club that meets, and so we did that this past weekend. And Saturday was a pretty powerful opening with the group we were breathing. And Sunday morning, I did a breath session and came up with a whole download about basically the formula. If you listen to one of the ideas that comes through in the Greek translations, you hear Yeshua saying, "Hey guys, the gate's really narrow. Very few people are going to be that find it." And what I came to understand experientially Sunday morning is that the gate is in your head, literally, physiologically. There is a literal uplink in your head to what the scriptures referred to as a different mind than the mind of the body. You go through the scriptures and it refers to the mind of man. You'll remember that at one point in the scriptures, Yeshua is confronting Peter, who's just whacked at the high priest's servant's head with a sword, trying to kill him. Fortunately, he just cut off his ear. And you'll remember that Yeshua literally calls Peter Satan. And then he defines what he means by Satan. And he's not talking about the dude with the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork. He literally defines word for word what he means by Satan. He says to Peter, "For you think in the mind of man, carbon-based memory, rather than the plan of God." Rather than being linked in, rather than being connected to the actuality, Peter, you're stuck in your own little perspective, your own little constructed reality between your ears, and you think you know what's going on. And that in Aramaic, now of course the Greeks turned that into the dude with the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork that's out to get you, and all the problems are out there, and all you have to do is defeat the one out there, and then you're set. And that totally and completely voids the work of Yeshua. Totally wipes it off the map. For those who perhaps haven't been listening recently, I am working on a new book, and the new book is everything. Here's Yeshua's voice. Everything they told you about me, including my name, that's all Greek to me. And so what I put together is the Aramaic pathway from my own experiential traveling of this path. And I would define this as a gateway. And Jeannie just came in with my grandson, Lincoln, who's now laying beside me, drinking a bottle. And we get to hang out while we're doing the show. So he gets to build the same brain cells as everybody else at 1 year of age. How cool is that? So this would be a description of the gateway that was being spoken of as being narrow from the Aramaic perspective, i.e., as it would have come out of the mouth of Yeshua and out of the mind of Yeshua. They talk about Greek translations of the scriptures. My offering is there is no such thing as a Greek translation of Yeshua's words. There is no such thing as a Latin translation of Yeshua's words. We're starting to approximate some English translations. We're starting to get the idea into the English language, but let's define translation to start with. Translation would be the accurate representation with words of what's firing in the speaker's brain cells. So, for instance, Yeshua speaks about forgiveness, and what's firing in his brain cells is you have a problem inside of you, and you want to go inside yourself, access the root of that problem that's hidden in your own unconscious, and remove it. That would be what is firing in Yeshua's brain cells in the Aramaic language when he talks about forgiveness. When he says, you must remove from your heart the wrongs of your brother, he's not giving you a bleeding heart statement. You must forgive from your heart. He's saying you've got to go into your own unconscious, which would be our modern updated word, or the scriptural rendition of heart would be the unconscious. So he's saying you've got to go into your unconscious and remove what you projected into your brain's image of your brother. You know, with our conversation last night in that session, Sean, you know, if I were to speak to that young lady, I'd have said, you're going to have to go into your unconscious, and there's a technology for doing that, and remove what you're projecting into your brain's image of your mother. And if you don't do that, you'll be in conflict with your mother forever. So that's kind of the foundation of where we want to go. We're looking to accurately represent what was firing in Yeshua's brain cells. Remember, he said, you've got to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Basically saying you've got to have the brain cells that I have, or you can't hear what I'm saying. So the starting point for this formula for living and being from an Aramaic perspective is that we are literally steeped in the energies emanating from the divine. We're marinating in the energy field of the Creator, and that field floods all space and all time. In the scriptures, they spoke of it as, in Him we live, move, and have our being. So we are living in the Creator's energy field. Starting point. And whatever you do, that is always undergirding you. Whatever you do, you can't escape from that. So this energy field embraces each and every one of us eternally. We cannot be cut off from it. And that energy field was loosely called in the ancient Aramaic language the Shekinah. So there is this emanation that we move through in our lives. Now, we can engage in untoward energies. In the Aramaic language, the word that would describe those untoward energies for a human being would be the word sin. It's an archery term that simply means off the mark. It doesn't have anything to do with the whole Greek monstrosity of sin. The word out of the Aramaic is, you're on the archery range, you fire at the target, you miss the bullseye, the scorekeeper yells sin. That's all it means. And to take it to the next level, if you were to look at the word evil, it's another archery term. In that case, you didn't just miss the bullseye, you missed the target altogether. That's all the word evil means. So when we're engaged in an energy that's off the mark in us, we literally dull or cut ourselves off from the awareness of Shekinah. And someone who's deeply lost in those untoward energies, quote unquote sin, well, and today we would call that mental illness or cognitive bias or incoherent brain operations and energies. If we're lost in that, we can block fully the impulses and the comfort provided by that from that gift that was given to us by the Creator. So when awareness in our field of these energies that are off the mark takes over, then this energy field in which we live, move, and have our being seems to vanish, which of course is not possible. So effectively being disconnected or separated from the Creator's influence, that's the root of the Aramaic idea that the Greeks turned into hell, that the Old English, the Latin translations turned that into hell. They totally misinterpreted it and fabricated this fear-based idea of hell. And you can do the research and there's no such idea in the Aramaic language. The closest that the word hell comes in Aramaic is that outside of Jerusalem, there was a garbage dump that was called the Gehenna. It's actually, I understand today, some fairly upscale, expensive housing now. But back then, it was a place that was always on fire because it's where they burned garbage. And if people didn't, say, for instance, have the money, if they didn't have the wealth to bury a dead relative, then they'd take that dead relative to the Gehenna and burn their body. And that became the foundation of this thing that people are terrorized with called hell, interestingly enough, in the name of a book that well over 300 times warns us away from allowing this sin of fear to even inhabit our minds. And yet this whole fear-based idea is plugged today in the modern world. Yeshua would be appalled to see what's been done with that idea. So in that state where those energetic patterns that don't belong within us, again, could be called mental illness today, awareness of this comforter is blocked because of the noise of that, the incoherent, discordant energies of our own sin. And of course, whatever that energy is, it's removable. That's what forgiveness is about. Now, here's another place where the Greeks turned it totally backward. The Greeks have given us a story. Well, if you're in pain, of course, it's their fault, but you be big about it and you forgive them. My offering is, if you want to actually engage in forgiveness, you will never forgive anyone ever again for anything. You will never even think of forgiving anyone, including yourself. You may choose to do what the Greeks are prompting people to do today, and that is pardon someone or yourself. Somebody does something that's off the wall, maybe illegal, immoral, terrible, awful, evil, ugly, whatever you call it. You might choose to pardon them, but if you had the Aramaic brain cells, you would recognize that the issue that needs to be cleaned up was in your own heart, your own unconscious. You remember that passage where Yeshua says, why are you concerned about or trying to take the speck out of your brother's eye while you have a beam in your own? He's leading us back into our own minds. And the only thing that can block being embraced in this energy field of the Creator are the incoherent and discordant energies of our own actions and behaviors. And they're removable. They're dissolvable. There's a part for us to play in the forgiveness process. And then the breath has to move in you in order for that energy to be unwound, to be undone. You know, that passage where they told us about an unforgivable sin, the denial of the Holy Spirit. If you go back to the Aramaic, what the Greeks have turned into some kind of disembodied spirit being, there was no such concept in the Aramaic. What they were talking about, literally, if you go back to the creation story, it doesn't say God sent out his spirits. The Creator sent out its breath, an intimate, direct connection to life in your physiology. And if you hold your breath, you are in denial of Rukha, or what the Greeks called the Holy Spirit. So it came out of a real living process into some kind of intellectual thing. There's this disembodied spirit being. And of course, if you deny this, if you blaspheme against this disembodied spirit being, then you've committed the unforgivable sin. But when you go to the Aramaic, what you realize, it is the action of the breath of the Creator, which is your breath in you, that is the only thing that can move energies in your physiology. And you watch people in trauma holding on to their trauma by holding their breath, which is the denial of Rukha, the denial of what the Greeks called the Holy Spirit. So there's no unforgivable sin, but if we won't engage in the power that moves the energetic patterns that are off base, then we're stuck in unforgiveness. There's another major turnaround that happened there. So the denial, the holding of the breath, literally stops the movement of energy and locks it in on a tissue level. And forgiveness is all about cleaning out these untoward energies which cut us off. So the Creator's breath, in Aramaic, literally Rukha, when we engage fully, dissolves, transmutes sin, with which perhaps we've cut ourselves off, literally, from the Creator. Or at least we've cut ourselves in awareness off from the Creator. So when we enter into the StillPoint breathing process and choose to actively forgive, that's when one purposely enters into that sensitive place. Literally, the proper use, the still point is the point where the breath spontaneously stops. And that's the point where the energy of resistance, the energy of those things that are off the mark, are flat. They're gone. And in that space, you remember there's a metaphor. The priests wanted to make this all their own. They had a place called the Holy of Holies, and only the high priest. What was the high priest? The guy without sin. You are the high priest. Your Holy of Holies is in your own brain. Your antenna for bringing in the energies of this divine eminence is your literal, the bony structure of your body. This is physiological. So if you're engaging in forgiveness and you apply the breath, then literally the action or the activity of any form of energy that's off the mark, sin, is dissolved. Now, free of sin, you can enter your own Holy of Holies. You can purposely enter that sensitive place, free from the energetic and cognitive blockages. And in that space, you become aware of, and you're able to enter the next level of connectedness. And in that space, supported by the Shekinah, which is then experienced as this indwelling presence or the comforter, it's no longer just something in which we live, move, and have our being, and it's not something bestowed upon us by somebody in the outer world. Although Yeshua demonstrated, if you go back and you listen, the Greeks did get this piece right. What did they say? He breathed on them and said, receive, engage your breath. Now, again, the Greeks bastardized that and turned that into the Holy Spirit. Hey, Lincoln, I got this little guy who's just kind of hanging around here, just came over and gave me a big hug. So once you are at that still point, once you're at the point where the breath spontaneously stops, the energetic movement of any energy that's off the mark is dissolved, then you're at the next level of sensitivity. This is where the gate is that he said, if you will find it, it's hard to find. And that's why I'm laying this out as, here's the pathway, here's how to go there. So now this energy field in which we live, move, and have our being becomes active on a whole other level. And having done our work, removing the incoherent energies that impact or interfere with our ability to hear this still small voice, the Shekinah, it's not just an energy that can influence us, but now it's an activating energy that activates the neural structure, literally in Aramaic. You remember when we talked about the Beatitudes, and that the first word in each of the Beatitudes is tuvehun. And tuv, it's a three-part word. Tuv is literally a neural structure or an attitude of mind. And what the Beatitudes say is you want to have your home in the breath of the Creator, because when you have your home in the breath of the Creator, that's one of the things that will allow you to activate this tuv, this neural structure that was planted in you from the beginning, literally in Aramaic defined as that neural structure was designed, which is designed to guide us to happiness and well-being. And if you go through the Beatitudes are a set of instructions for how to activate that neural structure. And of course, sin energies that are off the mark, and that includes any form of fear or hostility, distort and disturb both the influence of the Shekinah and the ability to feel, access, and be guided by that presence. So stepping into alignment, and now I'm talking about physiological alignment. We literally, every energy system that receives information, there must be a means of that energy coming into the system. The bony structure of your body, this is, again, physical. The bony structure of your body is how it gets into you. That's where they talked about the laying on of hands. It was about restructuring the antenna so we were back in alignment. And in full alignment, there's a full complement of that energy emanating from the divine that flows through us and flushes or washes out that which does not belong. So when we're aligned and that still point is reached where those energies of quote unquote sin are no longer active in any way, shape, or form, you're allowed to enter the Holy of Holies. This was my experience on Sunday. First time in my life. I got it. Ah, there's the gateway. The Holy of Holies is not in a building controlled by priests, but it's in your own temple. And we can connect to that. And in Aramaic, it was called Rukha. Modern terms for the states that are produced by Rukha would be states of heightened neuroplasticity, in the world of neurology, emotional intelligence, compassion, love. And Rukha can be experienced in two ways. One, it can be active. This is the word that Yeshua used when they said to him, what's most important in the law? He didn't say, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. He said, have Rachma when you think of the Creator, when you think of neighbor, and by so doing, you maintain self. So that's the active state of Rachma. And what happens is it influences intentions and ultimately perceptions and keeps them on track with love. Literally, the activity of Rachma gates out. There are three filters over the frontal lobes of the brain. One's hostility, one's fear, and one is Rachma. If Rachma is active, the output from fear and hostility cannot move, and so incoherent thoughts, quote unquote sin, or intentions cannot move, cannot go through the system. They're blocked. They're gated out. So that part of the brain, the frontal lobes at that moment, are literally fueled and guided by active present love. And when that's open, instead of having to go to carbon-based memory, the mind of man for our awareness, we get to go directly to revelation, where we're designed to live. Direct output from the ever-present actuality of Ryce, of life, rather than the multi-generational database stored from the past in what was called the mind of man. This is the state I would offer that Einstein said that he did his work from. He said his work was 90% intuition and only 10% intellect. He was talking about this being linked into this interface. So one aspect, Rachma, can be active, and then the other, if you're aware and you tap in and you go into your own Holy of Holies, then you can connect up through Rachma. And that interface is literally, physiologically, what was described as how to access the mind of Christ in us. So when Rachma is active, all energies of disconnection, quote unquote sin, are blocked from activity in the frontal lobes of the brain. This activates a second corresponding filter, which was called Kuba in Aramaic. And there aren't even words for this in the English language or any of, Greek, Latin, any of the derivative languages. There is no such concept. So not only was the gate narrow back then in Aramaic, but there aren't even words to describe how to even approach the gate in the English language. There's nowhere on the planet you'll find this that I know of. So Rachma activates a corresponding filter, Kuba, over perception, and now carbon-based memory, what was called the mind of man, also stays on track with love. Instead of its hostility and fear-based content running our minds, when Rachma and Kuba are active, you'll remember they said, perfect love casts out fear. What is perfect love? In Aramaic, it's Rachma and Kuba. So now the mind is on track with love. At that point, all perceptual output from the human mind, from this carbon-based memory system, is based in love. The mind of man in us is now at its highest and best. How do you describe that highest and best? Well, read Matthew 11:11. Here's Yeshua's talking about this state, and he tells us the one person he knows who's achieved it. So Matthew 11:11, he says about John the Baptist, truly I say to you, there has not risen on those born of women, that is, Rachma active but still functioning from the flesh-based mind of man, So what he's telling us here is John the Baptist is functioning out of still his flesh-based mind, but it's coming through Rachma. So he says, this guy is the top drawer. Truly I say to you, there's not risen among those born of women one greater than John the Baptizer. But the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven, i.e. the connected ones, is greater than he is. So the very lowest, he's fine. We're having fun. He's just kicking me a little bit here. Talking about my grandson. So what this passage does, if you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, is it tells you that there is a high level of functioning for carbon-based memory, for perception. And that's the flesh-based mind, the body's mind. And if Rachma is active, then you can live at the level of John the Baptist, and everybody, admire, went, wow, look at this guy. This guy is great. But then he says, he's nothing. If you're talking about having actually linked into the interface and had access to the mind that I'm trying to bring to you, the mind that I'm using. And that's what he's bringing, is that mind of Christ. So here's the invitation for those who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, to go to the next level, rather than being limited to the top operations of the mind of man, those among those born of women. That's what he's saying. He's referring to the mind of man, carbon-based memory, as John was, when we're actually linked by Rachma and we actually plug that interface in. And that's something you have to build the brain cells for and do. There is a work to be done. So rather than just Rachma being active, you're actually connected physiologically through this interface in the Holy of Holies in your own temple. And there, Rukha Dekucha, the Creator's breath is active, and you have access from the actuality, from what was called the kingdom. You have, rather than, there's some Harvard research that tells us that in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, this is lab stats, they've got somebody hook up to electrodes, and they're measuring brain cell firings. And in a time frame where 10,000 brain cells are firing, the max amount of data that goes into conscious awareness is 9 bits. And we refer to that metaphorically as the 9-bit mind. And so that's all that's available in the flesh-based mind, or that's the screen. And there's 10,000 units of electrical activity in that time frame, and only 9 bits get into awareness. And if Rachma is active in you, then all of that's going to be based on love. That's going to be your highest and best guidance system you're ever going to get from your physical mind, your quote-unquote body's mind. But then, if you link in, instead of, and that, the time frame, by the way, for that research from Harvard goes way back in the 50s. It's never been nobody's ever shown anything that goes against that piece of research. And it's the most quoted research in all of psychological history. In that time frame, which is about a 25th of a second, 9 bits of information available in the perceptual system, 10,000 brain cells firing. It's been estimated in that same time frame that the actuality is perhaps as much as 20 trillion bits of data. So this gateway, this interface hooked up, means that you've opened the gateway to move out of the flesh-based mind to go beyond the mind of Oh, okay. Yeah, he had hit it. I didn't realize. Thanks, sweetie. So when that interface is hooked up, we're now just not working with just what's stored in the flesh-based mind, but we have access to the whole of the actuality of creation and the mind of literally the mind of the Creator. And that input means that you have the 5 smooth stones of David. Goliath is the ego mind, and David, basically, remember, he's the guy who hung out in the taking care of the sheep, lots of time for quiet and meditation, and he develops these 5 smooth stones. And now the space where perception usually shows up, the 9-bit mind, is a space where instead of just constructs out of carbon-based memory filling that space, you get to have direct revelation. And if this microphone's getting a little noisy, Lincoln's decided he's going to grab my microphone. Hey, you. Hey, you. So this space where perception based out of carbon-based memory is what most people live out of, the mind of man, all of a sudden, literally revelation occurs direct from the actuality through the breath of the creator shows up. Now living in divine perception, which was called the mind of Christ, that was the place that John the Baptist tried to get to, and he opened it up for others. Remember, they called John the Baptist the forerunner of the Christ. What does that mean? It meant that anyone who's going to open this higher mind is going to have to meet someone. Remember, the other name they had for John the Baptist was the raving maniac in the desert? You're going to have to run into the person who can resonate your unconscious raving mind and bring it up for you. That's John the Baptist. Now, there were 2 skills that John the Baptist had not developed. He played that role for the king and queen, you'll remember. He told them about their errors. They lived in blockage of truth and weren't interested. When someone who's not interested in truth has their errors pointed out to them, then what happens is their stress goes up when truth shows up. And what do? They want to take off the head of whoever's handy. So John had not learned when to duck and when to hold the mirror up, and he lost his head. So John didn't make it to that state. He remained the highest of those born of women. But now, if one does the work that we're talking about, the work that, if you go back 2,000 years ago, there was a whole group of disciples that Yeshua laid this out to. And he used a metaphor. He used an idiom, an Aramaic idiom. He said, you've got to eat my body and drink my blood. Go and take a look at John 6:60 and see what they said to him. He told them what the work was, what I've just offered to you. What the work is to clean out of carbon-based memory everything based in hostility or fear. And what did they say? It records that the disciples that left said, too hard a saying, who can hear it? And they left, and then the scriptures record they walked with him no more. Now, picture the scene. Go read about that scene. And the energy was so disturbed. I can imagine, what was coming up for these disciples that ran off saying, I can't do that. What kind of rage, what kind of hate, what kind of fear, what kind of grief, what kind of pain, what kind of trauma was coming up? The energy space was so disturbed that at that moment, after and they don't tell us exactly how many disciples left, but after they left, he turned to Peter and the rest and said, are you leaving too? That's how disturbed the space was. So what I've offered may seem like a hard saying, but it's a work that can be done. We're laying it all out step by step. That's everything I've spent the last almost 60 years of my life doing, understanding and putting it into a form where you don't have to take decades and decades and decades to understand it. Here's the tool, take it and use it, and you'll arrive there. And so my question to close out our conversation for today is, do you have the courage to do the work that's required to face everything in you based in hostility or fear? Stop the projection. Set the filters in your mind for active present love. Breathe, feel, deal with what's in you. Process it out. Do your part in the forgiveness process. There's a part for you to do. That's what's in the worksheet. And then allow yourself to breathe and then literally the breath of the Creator, which you share with the Creator, your breath will dissolve those trauma-based energies, and you get to return to your birthright, to live as conscious, active, present love. It's what you're designed for. And the show is all about supporting you in living as that. So we're honored and delighted that you're here to share this space with us. Hope this has been impactful. I thought we might have a few minutes for conversation, but our time is up. So tomorrow, if you have notes and or you want a copy from the chat room, basically the outline that I put in there, which we just covered, and develop any questions you've got, any refinements, anything I can support you with. Everything in that is the step by step. Here's how you reclaim your human life and live literally in your physiology as a human being.